Kavisha seems to be back. Today we'll be talking to you about the legal front door, why you should have one, and how to go about building one on your existing tech stack. And today I'm joined by Kavisha, who was actually the first TLB employee ever. So over to Kavisha to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, sorry about that brief technical difficulty. Hi everyone, so I'm Kavisha, a senior legal ops consultant at TLB. I began my TLB journey actually 4 years ago when I started as an analyst in the legal team. I soon found my passion for legal design and legal ops, and now I'm focused on helping in-house legal teams save time and cut costs by streamlining the operations.
Thanks, Kavisha. And I'm Electra. I'm the founder and CEO of TLB and co-founder of 1NDA. I started off my career as a lawyer about 15 years ago now, and after working in some pretty large organizations, I decided to set up TLB almost 6 years ago now with a view to bridge the gap between in-house legal and the rest of the business. So before we go into the legal front door, just a few words about who we are. For those who don't know, TLB is a design-driven legal consultancy, and our mission is to help in-house lawyers maximize their impact through our unique blend of services. We offer smart outsourced support, legal design solutions, and technology implementation and optimization. And we're also the company behind 1NDA, which is the open source standardized non-disclosure agreement that's taken the legal world by a bit of a storm. And if you didn't know, we've also recently teamed up with Linklaters to offer a combined offering of best-in-class legal services plus legal design. And you can find out more about that on our website, and we'll also be sending a link in an email after to everybody who's registered for this webinar with relevant links to everything that we're going to talk about today. Okay, so what we'll be covering today is the following. So firstly, what's a legal front door? Why you would consider one? What does a legal front door do? What tools you can use to build a legal front door? And when I say tools, I mean existing technology that you have within your organization that you're probably already paying for. How to roll out a legal front door effectively, and what a legal front door could look like. And at the end, we'll also talk about some barriers that we hear from some lawyers who see the value in a legal front door, but feel that there are a couple of barriers to them going ahead and doing that. Before we crack on, I just want to say that we're going to be taking questions at the end of this webinar. So if you do have questions as we go along, please put those in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will make sure that we have enough time at the end to answer as many as possible. Okay, so just a little poll before we begin. I don't know how many times I've said before we begin. I'll stop doing that after this poll. So let's just launch the poll. Do you have a legal front door? Please answer on your screens. Interesting. Okay. So most people are saying no, but I'm thinking about it, or they're in the process of building one. There are a few that are really happy with their legal front door, which is great to hear. And some people who are not convinced. Hopefully you will be convinced by the end of this webinar. So thank you everyone for answering the question. Okay. So the problem with not having a legal front door is, there are many problems with not having a legal front door, but the three predominant problems are first, the death by 1,000 cuts problem. So the problem we see with many legal teams is they don't have a single point of entry for their legal requests. And this results in many problems. The first is that they come from everywhere. You get requests by email, you get requests by Slack, by Teams, by the water cooler in the office. It's just it becomes impossible to manage your workload. So although you have lots of legal work to do, you also have this massive overhead of managing where your requests are coming from. And it's really difficult to understand what your workload looks like. So you either don't have an understanding or you spend ages trying to figure out what your legal team is working on. The second problem is that you're not able to prioritize effectively, and the result is that whoever shouts the loudest gets the work done first. That's not a very strategic approach to choosing what you're going to do first. And so that's the second biggest problem. And thirdly, there's a massive data bleed, because a legal front door and having a method and a system by which you concentrate the requests and then deal with them by triage and by correct prioritization means that you are losing really important data that could help inform you on decision making in the future, but also helps you to build your business case for things like more resource or budget. So those are the three main problems with not having a legal front door. The solution to those problems is building one. And a legal front door is a single entry point for managing incoming legal requests from business stakeholders. It's a central database or ticketing system that logs and tracks requests in a transparent way. The benefits of this are the following. So firstly, it allows you to keep track of your requests. Now, we speak to many legal teams who have an idea of what their team is doing, but aren't entirely sure. A legal front door will allow you to keep track of what your team is doing so you can better manage your workload, see trends, and understand who's doing what within your legal team. It will also make you more organized and give you back some headspace, because if you're constantly thinking, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing, or I'm not quite sure what my legal team is doing, that takes up headspace in and of itself. And considering that legal teams are some of the most under-resourced teams in any business, it's important to really value your headspace and make sure that you're not clogging it up with things like administrative management of workload. The second benefit is that a legal front door will really help you improve the quality of the instruction that you receive. So there's a lot of time wasted when someone sends you a contract review or a question to answer at the outset. So take a request for a contract review, for example. There's a lot of back and forth trying to find out what the contract's about, what the value is of the contract, whether there's any personal data, etc., because you need that information in order for you to go ahead and review that contract. Trying to obtain all the relevant information at the outset of an instruction is really hard to do via email or Slack. Things get lost, and there's no way for you to improve that quality of instruction other than coaching people on an individual basis. So a legal front door will provide that structure that you need to improve the quality of the instructions you receive, which will eliminate the back and forth and make you more efficient. And that's because most legal front doors will have a form that prompts the requester to provide all the information you need at the point of request. And you can say what that information is, and you can stop people from being able to submit requests without that information, or you can be more lenient depending on the size of your organization or your approach. And so that is a really important part that will not only make you more efficient because you're not asking questions back and forth, but it will also allow you to deliver more quickly in the long run because you're not going back and forth during the negotiation to clarify things. The third is triage and allocation of requests more easily. So when a legal front door is implemented, what happens is that the whole business will use it to submit requests to you. When they come to you, then it's important to set up a triage function so that you can look at the request and then assess where it needs to go and when it needs to get done, depending on the priority and the urgency. When you don't do this, what happens is that anyone will just pick up anything that comes through the door based on their capacity, not necessarily their skill set or what they were brought in to do. So that's problematic because internally that doesn't sit well necessarily with the team. But also, as I said previously when I was talking about the problems, it ends up being a case of you doing the thing for the person that's shouting the loudest. And that's not necessarily a strategic decision that aligns with what the business is trying to achieve. So in fact, you really should be prioritizing the highest business need or the most urgent matter, and you're making that decision based on data, not based on the person who's asking for it. So coupling your legal front door with a clear triaging process will allow you to properly assess, prioritize, and also manage expectations. And then the next is capacity management. So knowing what your team is doing, what the volumes are, and how your workload fluctuates can help you manage your team capacity on a day-to-day basis, making and helping you to make better hiring decisions because you'll know what gaps to plug. But it will also allow you to be able to forecast things like peaks and troughs in your workload throughout a year. So if you know that March is a really busy period because it's quarter end. I mean, you know that anyway, but if you've got the data to back that, you can then use that to ask your team to, you know, take holidays at appropriate times, or you can say, I know that in March I'm going to have a massive workload, so I don't want to hire someone specifically just for March, but I might need some interim support. So in December, I know that that's going to happen because I've seen the data, so I can start looking for some interim report to come in March to help us. This information, although you might instinctively know it, is really difficult for you to use as a business case. You know, it's difficult to go to the CFO and say, look, we know that in March it's a really busy period. I'm going to need a contractor, or I'm going to need to outsource some of this work to a company. If you've got the data, you can say, look, for 2 years in a row, this has been the peak in March. Please let me go and get an interim person to help us with this. So it's using that data to do that too. The next is self-serve. Now, not all the software that we're going to mention today helps with self-serve in a very seamless way, but some of the better technology does. So there's no reason why some of the work you are now doing can't be done by stakeholders directly. So for example, creating and sending simple NDAs, like one NDA, hopefully, for signature, or getting answers to frequently asked questions can be done through a legal front door. And that will alleviate your workload. It will empower the business to pick up some of the more administrative tasks that your legal team might be overloaded with. And also, again, because you can track data, you can actually show to the business at the end of the year, look, this year, 200 NDAs were done automatically without any legal involvement. We've now saved X amount of time as a result. So that's a direct cost saving that you can demonstrate and build into your business case as to what the legal team's ROI is. We then have transparency. So one of the things that bogs down legal teams now are questions about where the contract is. You know, where's my contract? What's happening with that question that I asked you? Are you working on it? If you have a legal front door, you can allow access to the status of that thing that you're working on to the person who asked for it, and then they can just go in and self-serve again and check where it is. And they can also manage some of their actions there as well. So how many times have you had someone who's asked you where a matter is, and in fact it's sat with them, or it's sat with another stakeholder, and you have already told them about it? So this will just give people the transparency that they need in order to behave more autonomously, which actually they want. They don't want to be asking you questions. They want to have a way to find out what's going on. And I've mentioned this throughout, but valuable reporting and data insights is absolutely key. It's a massive value add of a legal front door. And the issue with not having a legal front door is that you're just not leveraging the data that your team's to-do list can provide you with. There is a huge amount of data you can access, such as which teams are utilizing you the most, how your contract numbers are fluctuating, and how they've increased. So, you know, if you can show that over the last year or last 6 months, the requests that you've been receiving have increased by 20%, then again, that's a really good piece of data you can use to build your business case for more money. Yes, so it can also help you just turn it a little bit on its head when people say things are always stuck with legal. We often know that they're not, they are with stakeholders, but this legal front door will give you the data that you need, again, to demonstrate that. Okay, so I've talked about all the benefits. I'm now going to hand over to Kavisha to talk to you more about the process of how a legal front door works.
Thanks, Electra. Right, so we know the benefits of a legal front door, but what can it actually do? So on this slide, we've just mapped out what the life cycle of a request looks like in a service desk. First, a request gets logged by business user. To make things easy for legal, we recommend setting up different request types with different forms. For example, request to provide legal advice or review a contract. This is so that you get all necessary information for that specific type of request when a new one gets logged. So once a request gets logged, it gets triaged. On some platforms, we could even do this automatically. So where requests are triaged and assigned to certain members of the legal team based on a criteria, for instance, you can ensure all NDAs are triaged and assigned to junior members of your team. So this reduces the administrative effort in managing the service desk, and it gives time back to your team, which we all love. While the legal team is working on requests, the head of the team can monitor workload and ensure that a member of your team is not working on too many or too few requests within a short period of time. And this just gives you an overview of team workload and how best to manage requests going forward. Once legal has completed requests, it can get resolved. But at the same time, you can look at creating reports to gather insights, as Lectra said, on the work coming into legal so that you have the tools to report back to stakeholders when necessary or anticipate any trends for your team's horizon scanning. Right, so what tools can you use to create a legal front door? Probably more than you think, actually. So when clients first engage us, it's often the case that they're overwhelmed by the legal tech market and need us to help them navigate it and choose the right tool for the legal front door. But we don't necessarily need legal tech to create a legal front door. We can usually just repurpose tech that already exists in the company. There's no reason why a simple front door can't be created with any sort of data collection platform, which can integrate with a task management system or even a spreadsheet, really. So we've listed a few examples on this slide. So Jira is one of the more sophisticated tools for creating legal front doors and is often already used by your IT team for the IT service desk. Jira is a great option as you can create your service desk portal, connect it to a knowledge base, and allow business users to make requests all from one place. And you can also create triaging automations and use metadata for valuable reporting. You could even put together a solution with different G Suite or Microsoft tools. So if you have an API integrator like Zapier or Power Automate, you can also set up a pretty slick integration for business users to create documents from a form automatically. So you can do this with NDAs, for example, and we usually connect G Suite or Microsoft tools to a separate system to track requests as tasks, as it doesn't have the functionality here, or the best functionality here, rather. So Slack's actually another option that we see quite a lot. So with their workflow builder, you can set up a form to collect request information and liaise with the requester directly on the ticket. And Slack may get a bit unwieldy if you're receiving lots of requests every day, but it's a great solution for smaller teams. And other platforms could be Airtable, Asana, Monday.com, or ClickUp, just a few more really. So moving on to how we can roll this out. So we'd recommend starting with a discovery exercise to identify what tools you have available, what you're going to use, what types of requests you'd like to collect, what data you need in each request, what reports you'd like to create, and whether you'd like to set up any automations. So you'll then go on to mapping your workflow and deciding on what the process is for both business user and legal when interacting with the front door. You'll then need to write out and design your questions with a focus on ensuring they're understandable to requesters, preferably with minimal legal terms. Then you build a solution, possibly with your IT team or external partner, test and iterate your tool to ensure it works, and lastly, roll it out to the wider business with a clear comms and training plan, very important, so you can keep up the momentum of rollout and ensure the front door is actually used going forward. Cool, so we'll show you an example of a service desk we created on Jira, but before that, a quick tea break that I'll take. Sorry.
Yes, I'm also, while you do that, Kavisha, I'm just looking at a couple of questions that have come through. So a person saying, can we get a copy of the PowerPoint slides? If you, so after this, if you registered, which you obviously have, we will send you an email. And if you do want a recording, you can message us back and we'll get it, but we won't be sending out the slides to everybody after this. And then Pam is asking whether we could get some guidance and insights on rules for allocation requests to avoid bottlenecks. We will deal with that at the end. So thank you.
Thanks, Electra. So what you can see on the screen here, so this is a simple portal that we set up on Jira where a business user can submit requests to legal. So on the screen here, what you can see is what the business user will see. So this isn't what legal will see. The idea is that a business user will click on a link that you provide them with, the link here at the top, and that will take them to the screen. And it's really important that when you're crafting the questions that will be shown to a user and even the request types, that you're thinking about the user and making sure that you're using language that is friendly and simple to understand. So what we see here is we picked 3 of the most common request types that we've built for our clients, but this is completely customizable. So for example, if you're a financial services organization and you need to use specific wording and marketing material, you can set up a whole workflow to guide business stakeholders who have questions about that specific wording. So for this demo, I'll just go ahead and submit a review request to legal, a contract review request rather. So we've added a few questions that the legal team may want answered here before they can start the reviewing process. And again, for the purpose of this demo, this is quite basic and also completely customizable to the information that you need to collect when you're reviewing a contract, for example. So here, I'll just take you through the form very quickly and I'll submit request and show you what happens. So over here with Jira, one of the good things about Jira is that it can identify the business user quite quickly when they have an account. So raise this request on behalf of, at least you know who it's coming from. The next question is, what department are you from? So here you can add a drop-down list of departments within your business. I'll just click operations here. What's the other party's name? Simple text field. I'm just going to put Acme Limited. What type of contract would you like us to review? So here as well, this is actually one of the more important fields within the request form, because we often see, for example, if you choose a non-disclosure agreement, you can set up an integration, a triaging integration in the back end where all non-disclosure agreements go to junior members of your team. So as I mentioned before, you take out that little bit of administrative burden with triaging. What's the value of the contract? I'm going to put 10,000 to 50,000. Again, another sort of triaging criteria that we usually use. So for contracts which have a greater value, we usually assign this to more senior members of the team, or we ensure that senior members of the team are kept informed if a contract of such a value has been submitted. Would you like to tell us anything else? I can leave that blank, but this is where your business user can provide more information about the contract and what they need you to do. And then please attach all relevant documents here. I'm just going to attach blank doc, but if they don't have the attachment in sort of a document format, we've also added a question right at the bottom that says, please include a relevant link if you'd like us to review online terms. So that's just easier than having them to download it, PDF it, upload it as an attachment here. I'm going to send that off. So once the request is submitted, they'll see this screen, which allows them to keep track of the request and provide more information to legal in the comment section below. This is quite handy as you sort of take out the need to constantly email legal back and forth, asking for updates and things like that. This screen, they'll get an email actually with a link to this, this screen here, so that they can keep updated of the statuses, whether legal has included any additional comments here, any additional attachments. So everything about the request is basically consolidated here on one screen. So this is the business user's perspective. I'm now going to move on to what legal sees really. So can I refresh the screen here? Acme Limited, that's just come up. So on legal side, they can log into the back end, they'll see the screen, and when a request comes in, they can click into it, review what's been submitted, so all the information is here, and then assign it to the appropriate member of their team. So I'm going to assign it to Electra, for example. But as I mentioned just now, for example, so if you have a non-disclosure agreement, if we set up an automation, it would automatically be assigned to Electra. So you don't even need to manually assign it. And then for statuses, which you can see right at the top here, when you start working on a ticket, you can change the status to in review by legal, for example. Obviously, these are just examples, completely customizable for what your team does. But one of the good things about status in Jira is that you can actually measure the time that a ticket stays in a certain status. So you can use that data to report on how long a ticket stays within each status. For example, if a ticket is stuck with legal for too long, or people say that it's stuck with legal for too long, rather, you can prove that actually, no, it's with the stakeholder more often. So legal doesn't actually take as much time to review a contract. So most of the tickets would be stuck with the stakeholder. That's just an example of how you can prove reporting with statuses. And at the bottom here, you can see a comment section. So as I mentioned just now, instead of a constant back and flow of emails or Slack messages, you can liaise with the requester directly from the ticket via the comment section below. So here you can either add an internal note, just for legal, not visible to the requester, or reply to customer, which just means it's visible to the requester. And just to be clear, actually, this won't be visible to third parties outside of your organization. It will just also give you an audit trail for that specific request. So rather than having to trawl through various emails or other messages to find out what was said, a complete audit log, a complete history will just be within the ticket itself. So actually, another cool feature that I wanted to show you is reporting that you can do in Jira. So this is just basically a very simple dashboard that I set up. But what we see here is charts showing a team workload on the left-hand side. So this is based on how many tickets are assigned to each member of the team, the number of requests received by business departments, and the number of requests received over a period of time. So here I've just set it to in the last month. But you can do this with any data, like how many contracts you've reviewed over a certain value, percentage of contracts reviewed on your template, types of contracts reviewed. So this will give you an idea on what your team is working on and whether changes need to be made, like providing additional training in certain areas or ensuring the business knows how to use your own templates. So this is just a short demo of what we created on Jira, and I will now hand over to Electra to continue on how to get a legal front door implemented.
Thanks, Kavisha. As you can see, that's really powerful, and that is a demo on a legal front door that we built on Jira. You can build a legal front door on lots of other tools, as Kavisha went through before, and I've seen a lot of questions that we will address at the end. But effectively, Jira is probably the most powerful. By the way, I must say we have no affiliation to Jira; they don't even know us. But we've worked with lots of organisations that have had Jira, and we will always prefer it if it's a tool that they have. There are other things like ServiceNow, or I saw someone said Freshdesk, that could work really, really similarly. And you can build it on any of those, and your IT team can probably help you, or an external company like ours could help you as well. But effectively, these ticketing systems are just easier to leverage when you want to build a front door. You can still use things like Microsoft or Google to build a front door, but it just requires a bit more knitting together. So you would need to integrate more than one solution together to build a full solution, which is completely doable. It's just a bit clunkier, and it's not the best user experience, but it does the job. So I might also add that building a legal front door or any other solution that you need on your existing tech stack is a really smart first step before you consider buying legal tech, because legal tech is very sophisticated. It's also a really saturated market. So you want to make sure that you really understand what you need before you go ahead and enter into a long protracted procurement and then a transformation thereafter. So this is a really good MVP, minimum viable product. However, although many people are convinced that a legal front door is a great solution, there are a couple of barriers that we hear to going ahead with it. The first is people think that it will make them unpopular, and people don't think that it will be adopted. So the point around them being unpopular and people will get annoyed with them, I just want to address that. So the first thing to consider is that on average, there is approximately one lawyer per 100 employees. And we conducted a survey back in when OneNDA was up and running. It still is up and running, but when the project was up and running, and we asked people questions around how their company makeup was, and we found that there is around one lawyer to 100 employees. It's no wonder that legal teams are one of the most stretched teams in any organization. If you're going to really deliver the service that your business expects and needs, you're going to have a system. And so the positioning here is, look, we need a system so that we can do the best for you. So I think that's always something to keep at the front of your mind when you're trying to build your case and you're trying to get adoption internally. This is not just for you to have a system. This is so that you can do a better job for the business and meet expectations. It will also allow you to be more efficient and slicker and quicker as a result. So, people are calling legal a bottleneck, then this will help you to not be a bottleneck, because it will make you much more efficient in the way that you operate. And it's also important to think about the user. So your message may need to be tailored depending on who you're speaking to. So to the finance person who is reluctant to use a form to engage with you, and instead of going to their favorite lawyer, as Ed, you said in the chat, don't go to your favorite lawyer, submit it via the form, because I need the data and I need to be able to triage it and give it to the appropriate person in the team, depending on their skill set and capacity. You need to be able to do that, and the finance people need to do that because it will save them money in the long run, because you're going to be more efficient. And if you're talking to customer support, you might say to them, look, we need you to use this form, because then you don't have to worry, when you're working all hours, or if you're working overnight and you wanted to see where the request is, you can self-serve. So depending on who you're talking to, you might want to slightly tailor the message and just be very targeted. And as with anything, there's change, and change is difficult, but it's not insurmountable. And we've seen great success in much quicker time than the lawyers initially thought it would take for the legal front door to have a huge impact on the organization. Now, the second thing we get is the cost. So if we can pop over to the next slide. So when people talk about the cost of anything, lawyers aren't the best at building a business case. So I wanted to kind of touch upon this, and please don't kind of hold me to the maths here, because I recognize that it might not be entirely accurate, but just to give you an overview of how you might want to approach this when you're building a business case. There's two ways that you can approach building a business case. So the first is you go just by pure savings, this is going to save us money. And the next is you really kind of understand what the business strategy is, or what the person's objectives are, the person who you're asking for money, what their objectives are, and then drill down on that. So this is it looks like a GCSE maths question, but basically, if on average a legal front door costs around 15K to build, it will save 1 to 2 hours per lawyer per day. We say that because I think that's reasonable. If you're spending loads of time going back and forth on emails or trying to figure out what you've got to do, I think that's a reasonable amount of time that you can expect to save with a legal front door. If in your team you have 5 lawyers, that will free up a total of 7 hours in your week, in the legal team's week. So the first argument, as I said, is a business saving argument, is a cost saving argument. So if per lawyer who's paid, say, 50K a year, which they're probably not, that would save you £20 an hour. So that's £140 a week. If you've got 5 lawyers, the business saves £700 a week, which is £36,400 a year. And therefore, the legal front door has more than paid for itself. So that's one way of positioning your business case. The second way of positioning your business case is by really looking at the business strategy and aligning your argument with that. So for example, if you are a sales business and your objective is to grow by 100 million in the next 3 years, you might say that for each 10 million of revenue, your legal team needs to review 400 contracts. If each contract is the average is 25,000, the average contract value is 25,000. Each lawyer would need to review, for each 10 million that the business makes, 400 contracts would need to be processed and reviewed. Each lawyer can currently review, say, 200 a year, but with the saving of 7 hours a week, that means that we can review an extra 40 contracts per lawyer, which means that we can deliver £1 million more of growth per lawyer. That sounds complicated, and it probably is, but basically, if you can look at the point here is, if you can just really delve into the business strategy and the thing that the person who's going to give you the money is really interested in, that's the way to build a very persuasive business case. So following on from this, this is just an overview of all the services that we provide, which I won't go into, but I wanted to turn to questions now because there are a lot. And we have lots of time left, so I'm going to turn to questions. If you have any questions after that, please put them in the Q&A box now, and we will start to address them. Okay, so Pam, you asked whether you can have any rules for allocation requests to avoid bottlenecks. So effectively, you can automate these. So if you want to make sure that anything that's an NDA or below a certain threshold goes to a paralegal for review, you can do that automatically via Jira. But if you're not using Jira and you're using something else that's less sophisticated, then you can set out what those parameters are. So it's effectively a playbook where you say, these are the, if this, then that. And by doing that workflow mapping exercise at the beginning, before you even build your legal front door, it will be much easier for you to allocate the work effectively. Let me know if that doesn't answer your question. Ed's asking whether we've used Monday before, Kavisha?
No, we haven't actually used Monday for legal front door before, but you said that they've integrated it with the Slack integration. We have done this with Jira, we have done this with Asana and Airtable before. So it does work quite well. And I think Monday.com has sort of similar functionalities. I think the only thing would be you'd need to liaise with the requester or the business user probably on another medium, because I'm not sure if Monday.com would be able to have all that ticket information in one place, but it's definitely a lot of what's a better solution than using emails, and it's a lot slicker, because if people are just using Slack, just let them use Slack. It will just sort of reduce the rollout friction, and it'll get people learning new behaviors, which is very important with this.
Cool. Sarah's saying, have you looked at using QR codes with middleware if needed to further ease access into the front door for users? No, we haven't. I don't know how that would necessarily work if people are using their phones or but interesting, we'll look into that. Thoughts on managing the culture shift from people emailing stuff to their favorite lawyer to filling out a form and getting whoever they get? Yeah, I mean, people do need to understand, as I said earlier, that if you've got one lawyer to 100 people, then that just doesn't work. And although we're trained in law firms and in other environments to be very accommodating, when you go in-house, unfortunately, you just don't have that luxury. And if you're going to deliver a service of the level that they expect, then I'm afraid that certain systems are going to have to be followed. Having said that, once they get into the system and once they can see how transparent it is and how data-driven it is, they like it. So they prefer it to just going to their favorite lawyer. And look, if you've got a relationship with someone and you want to continue to maintain the old ways of working, that's fine, as long as you have the discipline within your team that you're going to log that request. Otherwise, it becomes unwieldy. Okay, we have another question. Is there an MS Office or other MS app that can be used as a legal front door? Alicia?
Yep, so I can take this one. So there isn't one single app that I've come across, at least, that you can use as legal front door, but we have sort of used Power Automate to sort of automate forms to a spreadsheet, but also forms to SharePoint. And within SharePoint, there's quite a bit of functionality where you can sort of create a column, have statuses and things like that. Again, there isn't that much functionality in terms of liaising directly with the stakeholder, but in terms of capturing that information and having a sort of simple to-do list for your team and seeing the the workload of each team member, what's coming in, that's quite an easy solution if you have Power Automate. Just forms, SharePoint, and then you can deal with everything on SharePoint.
Great, thank you. And thanks, Heather. Yes, you can use Freshdesk. And thanks for your kind words on OneNDA. Okay, if you have both a front door and workflow processes with your CLM, for example, which also allows contract review or NDA drafting, how do you deal with both tools? Is there a risk that people don't know which approach is better? Yes. I mean, would you want to have two processes? Quentin, I'm not sure whether I totally understand the question, but I think if you're saying as legal, we have various processes and various tools that we want people to use, then you could design a simple one-pager on, I don't know if you're using SharePoint or if you're using Google Suite, you could use a Google site or just a document, or even on Slack where you pin certain links to things. I think that the point the point is that people just want ease, and people are, bluntly lazy. They don't want to have to look all over the place for things. So you want to just make sure that it's really easy for them to understand what they need to do and how they need to do it. And as long as that's a seamless process, they're more likely to engage. That is probably the biggest risk. People not knowing which approach to take or how to engage with you. If it's too much of a load, of a mental load, then what they'll do is they'll just reach out to someone to get the answer as quickly as possible. So yes, it's the user centricity of this, and anything that you roll out in the wider business is really important in order for it to be effective. What happens when a new draft of an agreement comes back from the other side? Does this require a new ticket to be raised? No, and Kavisha, I think you can explain that process better than me.
Yeah, so some certain platforms like, I think Asana as well, but like Jira and Airtable and ClickUp, there is sort of you can set up an email automation basically where there might be a manual step in which you forward it to a certain email address, but that will put all the information from your email into the ticket. So you just need that unique email address, and you can forward it directly, and it will add all the information onto the ticket so you can manage it on the ticket itself. Hope that was helpful. And I can also take the next question. So once assigned, can you view the team tickets on the Jira Kanban board? Yes, you can. There is an ability for you to have a different view, or you can view it on a Kanban board instead.
Mm-hmm. Would this front door be able to integrate with a matter management system or a CLM? CLM providers are quite hoardy with their tools, so they don't always offer open APIs, and it depends is the answer, so, which is, it depends on whether each tool has the right integration. You could use things like Zapier, but again, the certain tools might not be on the Zapier shop, so that might not work. But yeah, we would have to check exactly which CLM you're talking about and which front door you're using.
Yeah, but also I think we've seen with some CLM providers that, especially since they want to keep your business, they would create that integration for you, especially since if the wider business uses Slack, for instance, we've seen them create sort of custom integrations. Obviously, this doesn't apply to all CLM providers, but it might be worth asking them to just create a one-off custom integration, and that will, be a lot easier for you and the business going forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next question is, how would you suggest managing getting people to submit requests in good time? The temptation is to get people to justify the reason for urgency in the form, but I'm not sure if that's too brash an approach. I don't think it's brash at all. In fact, we built a legal front door very recently, and that was the question, is this urgent? When do you need this by? And if you're saying it's urgent, please justify why. I don't think that's brash. Again, you're a very under-resourced team, you're stretched, you just want to make sure that you're prioritizing the right things for the business. This isn't personal, it's for the business. The business needs you to do a certain thing, and if you're prioritizing things that aren't necessarily urgent when people are saying that they're urgent because they are prioritizing what they need, then you're not doing the best for the business. So if you just always keep that as a North Star, what am I here to do for the business, and how can I make sure that I do that as effectively as possible? I don't think it's brash at all. And I think that, when people say something's urgent and they know it's not, they know they're being cheeky. So when you ask them that question, you're holding them to account. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
And sorry, just to add to that as well, we have taken approaches where we take the sort of power in a way out of the stakeholders. So we'd ask them, when did the counterparty sort of return this review to us? So we have the date of when they return the review to us, and we can take into account, how long it's been, and also whether it's a material client, for example. So we can have like a sort of matrix for materiality, and we can see how important that client is to the business. And then we can, based on our own triaging process, sort of assign urgency to certain things. So we're not beholden by the stakeholder when they say, oh, it's really urgent, I want it now. We sort of other data points to look at to determine urgency there.
Yeah, great point. Jeremy is also making a great point, saying if stakeholders want to use multiple intake channels, do you recommend an integration tools that funnels in requests from, for example, email, Slack, etc.? That's a great question. Kavisha, I'll hand that over to you.
So we have previously, I think, especially when you're trying to build behaviors in the first instance, you can sort of set up integrations from email to Slack, email to the tool, Slack to the tool, and also we've also done Teams to the tool itself. So I think integrations is actually one of the key things that we've sort of worked on, especially when we're trying to save money and not buying new tech. We really, we say that integrations is great. I think in the long run, it would be good to stop people from using email, because sometimes they might, you sort of want to build behaviors in the correct place. But if we could just sort of consolidate where things are going, then if we could stop them from using email, I hope that makes sense. But basically, yes, we would recommend it. Yeah.
Yes, we can do that. We can do that. The problem with doing that, though, is that you're not getting the benefits of the form. So someone can just put, you can build out something that says, slash blah, 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 and it will go directly to Jira and raise a ticket in Jira just by sending a Slack message or just by sending an email. But the problem is that request, the quality of the data within that request won't be great. So it depends on, longer term, what do you want to achieve? Do you just want to achieve a to-do list with everything in it? In which case that might work. And if you're happy to go back and forth and that's less of a priority for you, that might work for you. It depends on what your priority is. But if your priority is to make sure that you're getting the highest quality information at the outset, then we would recommend that you don't do that, because actually you just want people to go ahead and use the tool. The other thing that you might want to do, just to make sure that people are still working where they're working, you might want to put a link to the Jira, say help desk, in your Slack profile. So when people come and ask you something, you can say, just click on, if they ask you a question, you can say, just click on the link in my Slack profile and it will take you directly to the form. Or if you've got a Slack channel, hashtag contracts, then people might just get an automated message that says, please click on this link, and the same via email. So if you've got a contracts inbox or a legal inbox, then the auto response, you can set up an auto response that goes back to the person that says, thanks for your email. If it's a request, please submit it via this link. So again, it's that user centricity and making sure that people are working where they're working and are getting a seamless response and a seamless experience. What we call it LUX, legal UX. Do you recommend to replace all emails by the Legal Front Door tool? And what about external users who do not have access to the tool? I don't know about replacing all emails. I mean, I'd love that because I spend so much time of my life doing emails, but I think that for some more complex matters, you want to work on email. Also, just to say that if you're working on really sensitive legal advice and legal opinions, you would want to retain email just for privilege reasons, but for anything else, then yes. If it's a request for support or a request for a contract review, we think email is actually an inferior product or an inferior solution to a legal front door. And external users who won't have access to the tool, they should be funneled through the stakeholder or the communications there should be funneled through the stakeholder who's raised the request. And actually, this is a governance point. So you want to make sure that the stakeholder understands what they need to be doing in order for this to be working well. And this is a piece within, when you've decided that you want a legal front door, part of the discovery and the workflow mapping will also be about governance, who does what. Do you have advice for best legal front doors for different size legal teams? Which best small, medium, large, etc.? Kavisha?
Yeah, so for large, I would say, well, we use Jira quite a lot, and we think it's got one of the best functionalities for any sort of service desk, even IT service desks out there. So we definitely say using Jira for larger companies. Even with medium companies, I think, especially if it depends on how many requests that's coming in, I think, and so what's the complexity of your request, what sort of data you need to collect. If there's very specific things that you need to collect, especially if you're in a regulated industry, then I think, using a more structured data collection tool like Jira would be best. But for small companies, I think anything like having a Slack workflow or having a very simple Google form that connects to a spreadsheet just so you can see all your requests in one place would be a good starting place. But yeah, I think it depends on not just size of the company, but how many requests coming in, what's complexity of requests, what types of requests. and definitely a more structured data collection tool will be the best in those areas.
Thanks, Kavisha. And then Pete's asking, how does a legal front door deal with external third-party requests that come in? If they're via email, you could connect the email so that there's an integration that goes email to Jira, and Jira creates a ticket. Again, you'd lose the benefits of the structured form, but there might be a workaround there where you say, when a ticket gets created, you then automatically auto respond and say, please click here. So yes, this is not designed for external third parties. I don't think you would want third parties entering your environment. So again, that depends. Maybe you do, in which case we can discuss, but this is not designed for third parties. And then Alex is asking, do you have experience implementing one of these in a company where the culture is very much the opposite? All comms done via calls, emails, not a tech business, not a big focus on data, etc. Yes, Alex, this is a really big challenge, and I totally appreciate that. But if you're, this is cliche, but if you're gonna make an omelette, you're gonna have to break some eggs, and not everyone's gonna be happy at the beginning. But in the long run, there's such huge value in this that it's worth really mapping out how you're going to implement this change. And even in tech businesses, people like picking up the phone. So yes, it's a challenge, and I totally appreciate that, but it's not insurmountable. Okay, how do you manage a legal front door for complex projects? So ticketing seems simple for something like an NDA request. Contract comes in, gets reviewed, any advice goes out. Bigger commercial projects often have moving requirements. Yes, Ray, agree and appreciate that. Actually, Jira is really good for that because you can keep an audit trail of all the comms in one place. And if you need to also have a project tracker or use other tools within the Atlassian suite, if you have Jira, you'll have the other tools as well, and then you can use that to manage your projects, and you can actually integrate different parts of the Atlassian suite or different parts of other tools together. Sorry, there's probably a longer answer there. I'm just conscious of time.
And also just to quickly say here as well, because Jira, you have the statuses, you can add in sort of approval workflows into that as well. So that will take you through that big commercial project and, like make it a bit more structured in where you are on that project.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Yes, so some people are saying the same thing, that leadership believes that we should build interpersonal relations with all stakeholders, and that for this reason there's a strong pushback to use Jira from leadership side. Yes, we have faced this argument before. Again, you just need to focus on the fact that this will make your relationships better. You're more transparent, you are quicker, you're more efficient, there's a clear audit trail. This will provide nothing but efficiency. So that's a good thing. And I think that people look at it and think, well, we don't want you to be transactional. We don't want you to just act like a service desk. We want you to partner with the business. But that partnership doesn't come from the way that you process your requests. It comes from picking up the phone when you need to, going into meetings, really understanding what they're trying to achieve and delivering on that. So I think that those are the things that you should focus on when you're talking to them about why a legal front door is so needed. And yeah, you can use some of the benefits that I mentioned earlier as well. And if you want a recording of this to show them, then please ask for it and we'll send it to you. Okay, so conscious of time, we have loads of questions. Please feel free to email us with any questions that we haven't managed to get to. And thank you so much for being here and for taking the time. And thank you very much.